What's up, fellas? My name is Tucker. In today's video, we're going to be talking about the Kevin Love situation in Cleveland. If you enjoy the video, make sure to leave a like rating on it. Check out my socials up there as well, and let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so this is just one of the weirdest situations in the NBA. 5 years ago, Kevin Love was celebrating an NBA title with the Cleveland Cavaliers, and now he is like maybe the most anonymous big-name guy in the entire league. I think some people might have actually legitimately forgotten that Kevin Love is in the NBA, potentially the most forgotten player in the NBA. He had 6 seasons in Minnesota, then he gets traded to Cleveland. He spent the last 7 seasons with the Cavs, and there appears to be no end in sight to his time in Cleveland, as he is, as we'll talk about later, apparently not interested in exploring a buyout to get out of Cleveland. The biggest reason he is still here is that after LeBron left in 2018, he signed a 4-year max extension because he, as well as the Cavs, thought that they were going to continue to be a decent team once LeBron left, which has almost never been the case for pretty much any LeBron team, because you put all of your resources into being a good team when LeBron is there, and then once he leaves, everything kind of falls apart, despite the fact that Tristan Thompson, I believe, afterwards said that he thought the East still ran through them after LeBron left. That obviously wasn't the case, and now Kevin Love is pretty much just in no man's land. He has 2 years and $60 million left on his contract, isn't looking for a buyout, and it is a very, very weird situation, and we're going to go through every single aspect of it. The first part of this I want to cover is that I've said this for 2.5 years. I'm still on Kevin Love Island. Like, don't misconstrue this video as like, I don't think Kevin Love's a good basketball player anymore. I've said for 2.5 years, I still think he can be productive for a good NBA team. This is not Andre Drummond. Like, this is a guy that I still think can really, really produce. He's a career 18-11 guy, despite the disaster that has been the last 2.5 seasons in Cleveland. He is an NBA champion. He can space the floor, which I think is so critical. When you're talking about a guy that is aging, that is a former All-Star, the common denominator amongst players that age well in the NBA, from All-Stars to good rotational pieces to good pieces on a good team, which I still think Kevin Love can be, is the ability to space the floor and not just be an in-the-paint guy. And Kevin Love can certainly do that. Is he going to be one of the best three-point shooters in the league? No, but he can still absolutely space the floor for you. He is still just 32 years old, by the way, which is critical. This is not a guy that's 35, 36, 37, and there's not a ton of mileage on him either. Yes, he's dealt with injury issues for the last couple of years, and that is a concern. But it's not like he's played 82 games 3 years in a row. Normally that's a negative thing, but in this case it could be a positive. He's not putting a ton of miles on his body, and like I said, he's just 32 years old. And I think there's a lot of parallels here to the Blake Griffin situation, where you could even argue that Blake was more beat up than Kevin Love was when he got bought out because of everything he was dealing with the knee injury issues, and he looked like a shell of himself in Detroit, and then all of a sudden he's really, really good in Brooklyn. I don't even think that Kevin Love is as beat up as that, and you saw that if you have skill as a passer like Blake does, if you have skill as a three-point shooter like Blake does, like Kevin Love does, you can still provide value to a team even if you're not a $30 million player anymore. And what adds to the weirdness here in Cleveland is that they continue to add guys at the position that Kevin Love typically plays, and they're acting like he's not even on the roster anymore. And typically you're like, okay, they're going to move on from Kevin Love. This makes sense. We've seen this 1,000 times. But they won't move on from Kevin Love. They traded in the last 12 months. They've traded for Jared Allen. They drafted Evan Mobley. And then they most recently traded for Lauri Markkanen. This is clearly a team that's going young, but they're acting like Kevin Love doesn't even exist. And again, typically you see a move in this type of situation, and that is what we now get to. The situation with Kevin Love. It's odd. It's weird. Normally, NBA players at this point in their careers, Andre Drummond, Reggie Jackson, Blake Griffin, I just named 3 former Detroit Pistons for some reason. Once you get to this point and you've made a ton of money and you're on a team that's bad and you're a former All-Star caliber player, you're like, you know what? I don't really mind giving up some cash here to go to a new team and not waste away in, for example, Cleveland. Someone correct me if I'm wrong. I can't recall buyouts are so common now. I can't recall an NBA player over the last 5 years that could still have value on a good team that just has decided that he doesn't want to leave. He doesn't want to give up the cash. Now, granted, it's way easier for me to sit here and say, hey, Kevin Love, negotiate a buyout when I'm not the one giving up millions and millions of dollars. Absolutely. But the only thing I can do is compare it to other situations we've seen in the NBA. And it is certainly an odd one with his reportedly unwillingness to negotiate a buyout. He's requested a trade for 2 years, and so maybe it's a pride thing where he's so at odds with the organization that he wants to win this, and he wants to be traded as a player that has value and keep his money rather than be a buyout guy. And I don't really blame him for his hesitation of being a buyout player, because when you look at Blake, Andre Drummond, once you get bought out, once you are labeled as a buyout player, Nick Batum, I believe, would be another example here. You don't get any more big contracts. It doesn't happen. You're a buyout guy. Once, you're always a buyout guy, and you're going to be signing minimum contracts for the rest of your career. And maybe Kevin Love is just not in a position to want to give up that much money. The counter to that would be Reggie Jackson, who gets bought out, ends up with the Clippers, doesn't look very good initially, has a great postseason last year, and gets what is for him a max contract. It was the maximum amount of money that the Clippers could have paid him. Granted, it's not actually a max, but it's still a significant contract, new contract that he signed with the Clippers. And so it is possible, but I don't blame Kevin Love for not wanting to give up the cash, not wanting to negotiate a buyout, and understanding that it would be better for him to be traded than it would be for him to be bought out. I just don't know what he's expecting to happen, right? It's clear that other teams around the league don't see the kind of value in Kevin Love that the Cavs do, and that the Cavs want in exchange for trade, and Kevin Love doesn't want to be bought out. And that means that he is going to continue to be on the roster, which for Cleveland has not been a good thing. With not only the fact that he's not really playing and the salary that he puts on the books, but he's had some very odd and weird outbursts. And this is all purely speculative, of course, but it almost seems like Kevin Love just wants to win. He wants to prove to the organization that they're wrong. He wants to prove to them that he is better than they think that he is, and that he is going to stick around until they can find a trade partner for him, or he can go somewhere else in free agency. And that means that he is going to be on this team for at least another year or two. A year from now, he will be a $30 million expiring contract, which is easier to move than a guy with 2 years, 60 left on his contract. Or maybe it'll be 2 years from now and he'll be a free agent at 34 and go and sign a new deal. If I was in his situation, granted, I'm not the one giving up millions of dollars. I've never been in this situation. I would imagine that I would want to leave, especially if the two NBA teams that I'd played for were Minnesota and Cleveland, and I had the opportunity to go to LA. I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory, I think, the direction I would go in there. I'm not convinced it would be the Lakers, by the way. That's the one that people keep bringing up if he does agree to a buyout. I'm not 100% sure that Kevin Love wants to do the LeBron thing again. He got the title, and I'm sure he's very thankful and grateful for the experiences that he had in Cleveland. But I'm not sure that Kevin Love and LeBron James have a fantastic working relationship. Let me put it that way. With how things went down, the blame that Kevin Love got in Cleveland, he would have been traded if they didn't win the title in 2016. They would have traded him after that season. And so I don't know if he wants to do the LeBron thing. So maybe he ends up with the Clippers, or maybe, like I said, it's a year or two thing. I think the other factor to this, think about other buyout guys. Like the ones that keep coming to my mind are Blake, Andre Drummond, Reggie Jackson, if you go back further than that. Those guys hadn't won titles. And maybe that was their major motivation, was like they're going through the check boxes and they're like, okay, I've been an all-star, all-NBA guy if you're Blake. I've got a ton of money. I don't have the title. I'll give up cash. I'll give up this stuff. I want to go somewhere else where I have a legitimate chance to compete. I need the title. Maybe Kevin Love doesn't need that. Maybe he looks at it and is like, you know what? I'm cool chilling, getting my $30 million a year, and this being my NBA career, this being, a one-time NBA champion, a guy that's a multiple-time all-star, pretty good career stats. I'm cool with that. Maybe that's his mindset, and I wouldn't blame him if that's the case, but I think that could be one other factor here that we aren't really considering, is that this guy's won a title, and maybe the motivation that exists for a lot of buyout players could potentially be the opportunity to go win a title. He doesn't need that. Ultimately, it is a weird and unfortunate situation. And again, it is just different than anything that we ever typically see in the NBA. There's just things that you expect to happen in the NBA, right? A guy asked to get traded, and he's a relatively big-time player. They get traded. A guy is wasting away on the bench for years and years and years. He eventually negotiates a buyout. Normally, it's sooner rather than later. It's an abnormal, it's a weird situation, and it's going to be one that we're going to look back on years and years and years from now, wonder how in the world that happened. How Kevin Love just sat in Cleveland for 2.5 years with an outstanding trade request, with an unwillingness to negotiate a buyout. And he hasn't necessarily represented himself the best at times in Cleveland, but I am still rooting for him to end up somewhere so that he can ideally find happiness again on the basketball court, because I can't imagine that it has been a fun couple of years for Kevin Love to just kind of sit around and wait with the Cleveland Cavaliers. But yeah, that's going to be the end of today's video, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to leave a like, rating out. Check out my socials down in the description below. Once again, my name is Tucker. Hope you guys have an awesome rest of your day, and I will see you all next time.